Hey family, it's Patsy White. Uh, Today my computer has decided that it's through. I don't know if it's permanently dead, but it is definitely not coming to life. So I've taken this opportunity to break from my series on fear to talk about what's happening currently in this country. I think it's important to talk about race and what these demonstrations and the murder of George Floyd has helped bring to the surface again. And I think there's so many ways I could go on this because it's a reality that I'm trying to convey, and it's also a reality I'm trying to convey um, so that the hearer knows that it's pertinent to their life. As someone who grew up in this country as an African American, I've had many, many, many experiences over the decades, all that have been very painful and difficult to process. Um, but one of the things that's important about the George Floyd case is that whereas, my reality and the reality of people who have darker skin is very different than the reality of people who are white. And even as I say this, the hard part about this is that every single individual has a very different experience of life. But there are many common experiences that people who are African heritage can relate to. And so, as I'm even saying this, I'm aware that my audience, the people who are listening, are you're white, you're African American, you're from different countries, and so even as I speak, I'm aware that I'm speaking to a very diverse group of people. So to start, the murder of George Floyd was a powder keg because in many other cases, and there are many, even the Arbery case in Georgia, Brianna, I'm missing her last name, and her boyfriend who were killed in their apartments by police who showed up with a no knock warrant, plain clothes in the middle of the night, and the boyfriend shot them, believing, of course, that anybody coming at that hour means harm. And when he shot them, he was put in jail for that. So stand your ground did not work for him. Even still now they're saying he might be charged, which is absolutely heinous. That somebody, in their home, when somebody shows up and with guns, um, shoots them and then they're put in jail for it. So with George Floyd's case, as in many cases, usually there's the denial of the fact that um, African Americans are regarded typically with more suspicion and fear, and therefore are more likely to be killed. Um, the George Floyd case eliminated any possibility of dismissing it as anything less than what it was, which was that the officers involved decided to kill this man, even though what they were showing up for was a possible forgery or something in a store. So, you know, um, that's not even stealing a car like a felony, which many black people have been shot and killed for stealing a car. So my what I want to say is that um, as I tread carefully, because more than anything, I want this post to open up a place of understanding more than I want anyone to feel defensive or guilty, because defensiveness and guilt do not lead to growth or freedom, just the opposite. This is an opportunity for us to become free. As someone who grew up around a lot of European Americans, I've had the opportunity to see the pressures on you, and I'm speaking to my white brothers and sisters, on you when it comes to race. It's prickly. So, because there's so much unspoken and unexpressed issues around race, it's a prickly and difficult topic to discuss without there being defensiveness. So, the things that I've observed about white Americans is that there's an extreme amount of pressure to outperform and to be smarter than and to have more money than, that you're pressured to be more prosperous, to look more prosperous, to be more successful than your black brothers and sisters. And that also there's a lot of pressure to not bond with or be connected to or defend a black person because that could lead to possible ostracization. So there is a lot of pressure within your community as white people to have a kind of hands off um, experience with race. You know, even interracial couples, there's pressures. So, and then for us, for me as an African American who's had a lot of experiences of inequity, and threats, fear for my life. I don't know how many times I've been pulled over by police. Lots of things that have happened that have scarred me, but I thank God that I'm getting freed from. Um, that it's important to understand that, for many of us, especially as African Americans, there's been such an inequity of justice. Um, it starts so early from the school systems. We call it the school to prison pipeline because statistically you can find it everywhere. African American students are punished so much worse for the same offense than white students. That as soon as a student is seen as African American, then they're suspect. There's a thought that there's a negative association with them that just assumes the worst about their character and behavior, so that they're routed, they're kicked out of school, they're expelled, which is basically putting them in alternative schools, but basically leading them into juvenile detention and then the prison system. So, in every way, shape, and form, from financial discrimination around housing and mortgages and loans, all of those things are just constantly, they're just part of the picture. So the reason why we had the civil rights legislation and basically anything about fair housing is because the practices of discrimination were so saturated in every part of the culture that a legislative response was the only way to try to bring some equity to the resources that many of us worked for but never received benefit of. So, boy, there's so much to be said about this. So, the even though this country was founded on Christian principles and the word says that God is not a respecter of persons, it's a very different thing when you have a spiritual undergirding that says we're to be equal before God, but a cultural standard that says that we're not. So, what we're living in right now is the conflict between those two realities. Hmm. So, I'm going to wrap up just because there's no way in one post I could say it all. I want to encourage everyone who's listening on this post, no matter who you are, what country, where you are, pretty much globally, there's been an exportation, if that's the right word, of biases about brown skinned people. The darker you are, the more disregard. And so in every country, there's been, cultural exports of opinions about black people. And so I encourage you to go before God, to go before the Lord, and speak your honest heart about the places where you struggle with the thought of being equal to a person of African heritage, a person from the continent of Africa. I think it's important to go before God and share your fears, your biases, your prejudices. Share things that you may have remembered that you said or did that made you feel bad. And as a black person, there are ways that I have judged other black people. Go before God about every place of prejudice because that is where evil hangs out and that is where we miss the humanity of each other. Every single human being has gifts. God designed us that way. And when we're in our prejudices and our fears, we miss those gifts. we miss the treasures that are in each of us. It says we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of God may be. Oh my, I'm gonna mess up the scripture. We have these treasures in earthen vessels, that the excellency may be of God and not of us. Our role, our role as human beings on this planet is to be able to overlook the window dressing to see the treasures in each other. So I'm going to wrap up this post because it's over 10 minutes, and I know my Facebook people, we have a short attention span. God bless you. Thank you for listening. I post your honest comments in the below. Um, if you disagree with me thoroughly and actually feel dislike or whatever strong feelings against me, I'd prefer that you not post. This is a sensitive and painful time. When somebody's injured or wounded, you don't want to wound them some more. So if you disagree or don't want to say anything, then or want to say something to let me know how much it hurts you what I said, then please pass on the post and then just maybe post your own Facebook piece, because I don't want to be injured by your anger at me. So thank you for listening. God bless you. And if my computer's working, I'll continue the series. If it's not, it will probably be yet another post on my phone. God bless you.